Hi, everyone. Welcome to Working with Values, in particular, value scale and shading. So, let's create a value scale. You're going to need a pencil for this activity, also a ruler. If you have drawing pencils at home, that's great. Use those. And with your ruler, I'd like you to draw a box measuring 1 inch by 5 inches. For every 1 inch, please make a mark so that you know you'll have 5 sections. If you don't have a ruler, use a straight edge. And the length will be approximately the size of your outstretched hands. Okay? Break each section up so you have a total of 5. And then label each section from 1 to 5. 1 will be your darkest value. 5 will be your lightest value. Now, before we get to drawing this value scale, I'd like to share some shading techniques with you so you can practice. Make sure you have your pencil handy. If you have an eraser, you'll definitely need that. I like to suggest for students using darker values to utilize the ebony pencil. A kneaded eraser is a great tool to have as it erases any shape, a blending stump, and you can even take a paper towel and wrap it around your finger and use that as a makeshift blending stump. That will help to push some of the graphite around your paper. Okay, so let's go over some of these shading or blending techniques. And you really will need to practice quite a bit. So the first technique is applying different amounts of pressure. You want to use firm pressure for darker values. And you want to use light pressure or less pressure for lighter value. Practice that in your writing and also practice that in a little section of your sketchbook that you're shading. You'll see that darker value is achieved with more pressure, a firm pressure. Lighter value is achieved from less pressure. That's a very important technique to know when you're working with pencils. Next, when you're shading or blending, it's important to have those lines close together. So I always tell students, when you're making your marks, have your pencil marks very, very close together. Don't let there be negative space or the white of your paper showing through those sections. And draw with your lines close together. Okay, another technique that you can use for shading or blending is actually overlapping lines. So you can draw in one direction, and then you can overlap that drawing with lines that are close together and varied amounts of pressure in an overlapping way. That will help you not only to achieve a darker value, but it will also help to blend your value. This also lends itself to drawing in different directions. So you can draw in a horizontal orientation or a vertical orientation, but if you draw in different directions, what you'll notice is that what you're shading in will tend to appear more blended. Also, a technique I suggest for students is drawing in circles or ovals to avoid sketchy situations. What I mean by that is if your drawings look really sketchy and really rough, like uncontrolled, make sure your lines are very close together, but also consider drawing in circles or ovals instead, as it will soften the line. Okay? You also have to practice really how much pressure you're using with your pencil on your paper and how you're overlapping your lines to create different shades. Next, you can use some other tools to help you with your shading. I like to use a blending stump or a paper towel as it moves some of the graphite around my paper. Be careful though, because if you do this too much, your paper can get tired and it cannot handle so much changing the texture of that paper. So you can see here how it moves it around. If your drawing isn't neat and if it's quote unquote sketchy, using a blending stump or paper towel won't really help your drawing. It might actually hurt it. So make sure that your drawing is controlled and your value is nice and neat and clean. Okay, another technique that I suggest for students when they're working with blending or shading is to keep the drawing strokes small and consistent. Like have control over what you're doing. Like take your time, go section by section. And of course, for your work to look more refined and to show that it's developing and you're developing in your skills, you really should use all of these techniques simultaneously or quite often. So let's try these with your value scales now. You have 5 sections. Section number 1 is going to be your darkest section. You could use your ebony pencil if you received that in your art pack, or if you have a pencil set at home that's like a 6B or a 3B, that will work. You can also achieve a dark value with the number 2 pencil. You just have to make sure to use a decent amount of pressure. Okay? And as you go through your value scale, go a little bit lighter for each section. And you can achieve lighter values not only by the amount of pressure that you're using from your pencil to your paper, but in how you're drawing your lines, how many times you're overlapping your lines or your shading, how you're using your eraser, and how you're using your blending stump. Now, in theory, a value scale is pretty easy, right? I mean, you're just drawing a box or a series of boxes and you're shading them in. The challenge here is that you want each of your values to have a gradual change or shift from the darkest to the lightest. So that's something that you're going to have to practice controlling as you're working in class today. It'll take a little bit of back and forth. If you find that you're frustrated or you find that you're not happy with your drawing, go ahead and start over again. But this will be important for us as we work with blending and shading later this week, because you guys will be filling up your perspective projects, either your names or your buildings, with shading techniques, either in graphite or in colored pencils. And so you really need to develop this skill and practice this skill in order to have a successful project. Continue using the tools that you have. And keep going from there. I found it got a little tricky with my lighter values because I used my blending stump too much. So understand you don't have to use your blending stump all the time. That's a tool that's a little tricky, okay? So continue developing and creating your value scale that's showing a nice gradual change from darkest to lightest. I'm looking for something that's really clean and really controlled, okay? Good luck. You guys got this.